Hello again. One of the things which I've noticed over the years is that the more educated and clever people are, the less am I able to make any sense of what they say and write. This seems to me to be a general rule. If I'm with an ordinary working class person, there is seldom any communication problem. I say something and he or she responds and we both know what we're talking about. With intellectuals, the case is altered because they often use long, complicated sentences with fancy words, and after a few minutes, I'm lost. Instead of plain English, academics and people who have been highly educated tend to slip into a weird way of speaking which seems to me not to convey any meaning. At least it conveys no meaning to me. Here's an instance of what I'm talking about. I'm still looking at this book, Racism, A Very Short Introduction. After talking about the British Empire, the author says, this went hand in hand with what one might call the effeminisation of the natives in the colonies. Colonised lands were given feminine names, Virginia being the most obviously sexualised. In British imperial projects, the effeminisation of colonial subjects combined with a class-divided reconstruction of British masculinities. I have literally no idea what any of this means. I do not know what is meant by the effeminisation of natives in the colonies, and nor do I have the remotest idea what the class-divided reconstruction of British masculinities is about. I suppose that some colonies were given women's names, Carolina, for example, but others were given men's names, like Georgia, named after George II. On the next page, there is talk of the valorisation of equality. Again, I do not know what this means. I find it a little suspicious when people write and talk in that way. I assume that if somebody has something to say which makes sense, then the easiest thing is just to tell people about it in simple language and see what they make of it. This doesn't mean, of course, that we should never use long or unusual words, but perhaps we ought to save them for when they are actually necessary to avoid ambiguity, not to scatter them about to create ambiguity. Because I'm a simple man, when anybody cannot explain to me in plain English what he is doing or saying, I smell a rat. I'm sure that we've all had the experience with electricians or garage mechanics and other people who rattle off a long string of technical expressions before telling us that we have to give them a lot of money to fix a problem. I find academics and intellectuals a bit like that. They come out with a lot of jargon and long sentences, and the bottom line seems to be that we are idiots and they alone can tell us what is wrong with society. Winston Churchill, the only British Prime Minister to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, incidentally, had no use for empty words. If he received a bulky file with some proposal and it was padded out with endless waffle, he used to send it back and demand that it be given the gist of it on a single side of a sheet of paper. I feel the same way when I'm ploughing through worthy books. The trouble is, if you don't use clear and straightforward language, then your thinking is unlikely to be clear either. This is especially so when you're dealing with subjects like politics or sociology, where there's already a tendency to ramble a bit. Schools are partly to blame for the problem, because starting at primary school, before the children are even 12, they are taught that there is a difference between formal and informal language. It is explicitly stated to them that formal language should use longer and less familiar words. The result is that an 11-year-old will start writing a simple composition and the teacher will then go through it, correcting it, suggesting that the child use more elaborate language. They leave school feeling that ordinary English is not good enough for anything which is written and that it must be translated into formal or posh words. I have an idea that this is at the root of what we often see. the longer people spend in full-time education, the harder their writing and speech becomes to be able to decode